And welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is Shaka from Shaka Gaming. If you guys can't get enough of the SWGOH content, we've got another great video for you guys today. Today, we're going to be looking at a GL tier ranking. We love tier rankings here, and I am super excited to get into this. Hopefully, you guys are excited for this because I know I am. Let's get into it. All right, so first and foremost, everybody, we're going to be taking a look, like I said, here at the different tier rankings. We're going to go over the actual tiers first, and then we're going to start the ranking of the GLs themselves. The tier levels are probably going to give away a little bit, if you will, but we'll try not to get too far into that just yet. So we're going to be starting from the bottom and working our way to the top. Want to mention that this is going to take into account everything in the game, guys, not only from a PvE, PvP, conquest, etc., content, but also we're also going to talk a little bit about early game versus late game. So if you are new to SWGOH, this is going to have a lot of relevancy to you. If you are an old timer that's been playing this game for a super long time, it should also still be relevant for you as well. So first and foremost, our bottom tier guys. Now, the bottom tier here does not necessarily mean that they are the worst GL in the game. Okay, keep that in mind. But our bottom tier right now is Hitchhiker Express. And what that basically means is that they need a little bit of help. They need someone else to come along and kind of help pull their weight along, if you will, to really be super duper effective in the game. Now, with that being said, every one of the GLs has some kind of, buddy or sidekick that goes along with it. And that plays a role in this, but these particular GLs that fit into this category are absolutely in dire need of that sidekick to really do well. So we're going to start things off first and foremost, guys, with none other than Lord Vader. Lord Vader is going in the Hitchhiker Express category. Here's why. So number one, without Maul, he's just so disappointing. He absolutely has to have Maul. Does he have a lot of viability in other parts of the game? Maybe. He can do some feats for you in for instance, Conquest. He has a little bit of viability in TB in terms of him being able to do stuff there. So he has some PvE viability without Maul, but not a lot. It's fairly limited. Where he really gets hurt, though, without Maul is in PvP content. He can be countered by a lot of things. Now, I know there's a big contingent of you out there that are like, you're an idiot. This is a great GL. He's an amazing GL. Why does everybody hate on Lord Vader so much? Listen, I get that. And I get that some of the other GLs, without their lifter, so to speak, are also very weak, or not near as effective, is probably the better way to say that. But there is just too much that counters him too easily whenever you don't have Maul in the team. Even with Maul in the team, he's still just not incredible, guys. I don't know. He has his viability. He's not a bad character by any means, but in terms of the GLs as a whole that we're looking at here, he's one of the worst ones that you can have. And here's, I think, the big kicker as to why he's one of the worst. His requirements are so extensive. Are the characters good? Yes, but they are so high and intense. If his requirements were more, along the lines of, let's say, like Slicker, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Then he would be a much more valuable GL. But his requirements are super high. You have to have that lifter unit for him to really be effective. So it really hurts a lot, unfortunately. So we're going to be putting him in the Hitchhiker Express category. He has viability elsewhere, but he's really hampered without Maul in particular on the team. Now, we do have one more GL that's going to be going in this Hitchhiker Express category for now. For now. We are recording this prior to Bane dropping. I am really intrigued to see how much this changes once Bane drops. But bear in mind that this still is a lifter unit, guys. C still requires that lifter unit. Currently, his big lifter unit is Watt. Without Watt, he really struggles. He can still beat some stuff, but not GLs. He has to have Watt to beat other GLs pretty much. With Bane, it's probably going to be the same way, except I think it's going to be even better. With Bane, I think we're going to see him beating all of the GLs on offense. The problem here with C, as well as Lord Vader, is that on defense, they just don't do that well. They're really limited. C obviously is limited because you can't set a team of 2 on defense, versus Lord Vader is limited because if you don't have that lifter, he's super easy to beat. C, unfortunately, so I'm going to put C actually below Lord Vader because in PvE content, he's absolutely terrible. Far and away, in my opinion, one of the worst GLs in this game. But he's super viable on offense. His requirements aren't super bad. Are they great? No. But they do help you a lot in fleet, in particular, if you're going after him. So he's got some good viability. He's not bad. I have him. I don't regret having him. I'll put it that way. I don't have Lord Vader. I would not reject getting Lord Vader, but his requirements are just too much for me at this point in time in the game. So I think in either case, both of these characters are much more late game. If you are an early game player, you do not want to go for these guys right off the bat, in my opinion. Save them for later. Save them until you're getting up into the 8, 9, 10 mil GP, and then consider getting them. There are far better values on this list than Lord Vader or C in particular. Like I said, this is a little bit subject to change with Bane coming out, but I still think even with Bane, it's going to still be very similar to what we see with Watt. There's not really going to be a significant change there. All right, moving on to our next tier, guys. We have Supreme Soloist. I'm pretty sure you all can figure out who is going into this category. To be clear, again, this does not necessarily mean that this character is a C caliber GL. We'll get into that in a moment. This is more just the category that he fits into. So Supreme Soloist, if you guys don't know, Supreme obviously refers to Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. And it's Soloist because, quite frankly, he can just solo so many things. He is so good by himself. He really needs, he's kind of like Grievous to some degree in that he does, to beat some of the high-end teams that are out there, he does need other sacrificial lambs. But he just gets more and more and more powerful as the match goes on, to the point where eventually nobody can beat him. He's just too powerful by himself. And that applies to PvE as well as PvP content. So that's something to remember. He is going to get you wins, and he's going to get you very good outcomes by himself. The problem with this is that in Conquest, for instance, where you're trying to get 3 stars on everything, he's actually really bad. Can he get you wins? Yes. Can he beat some really, really tough situations? Yes. But he is not going to get you 3 stars, folks. He is not likely going to be getting you a whole lot of feats. So keep in mind that while, yes, he can be very good in some PV aspects, particularly think early TBs in particular, guys, he is fairly limited when it comes to PvE content because of his lack of ability to sustain an entire team. He's great in raids, early raids, that is, in particular, because of his ability to post massive scores. But if, again, you're late game, his viability in PvE is very, very, very limited. If you are a beginning SWGOH player, however, so this is why I said this isn't really strictly an SABT, etc. tier listing, because if you are an early game SWGOH player, guys, he's probably S tier. He's probably the #1 GL you should go after. He beats pretty much everything on offense with the right comps. He, in PvP, to be clear as well. For early game raids, he does amazing stuff. He will get you amazing scores in early game raids. He's extremely easy to get and extremely efficient to get because all of his recs are very good recs for the most part, and they benefit him as a team. So if you are a beginning level SWGOH player, this is probably an S tier character for you. This is probably an S tier GL to go after. I would recommend him first personally. He is that good. He is that solid. In the grand scheme of GLs across the board, though, I do think he's a little bit lower simply because he's not good across all game modes and all different types of environments. Certainly a very good player, though. A very good character, I should say. Certainly worth going after. He was one of the last ones, actually, that I most recently got, but I don't regret it at all. I kind of wish I had gone for him earlier, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. So that actually wraps up that tier. We're only going to put one person there, hence why he's a soloist. He's by himself. Moving into the feet freak category, guys. This one is a little bit unique in that I looked at these two characters. There are two of them. And they are kind of unique because they do two very different things. But they both are great for feats in Conquest in particular. We'll talk about that in a moment. So the first one is an absolute offensive powerhouse. And that is Jedi Master Luke, guys. The amount of feats that you can do in Conquest with this character it's just incredible. He is so good in PvE content really across the board. He obviously shines in Conquest. He does very well in TB as well, especially if you're in Rote in particular, on light side battles. Phenomenal character for that. Most of his recs are very good recs for the most part too. It brings up a lot of your Jedi faction, etc. So he is certainly not a bad character to go after either. The biggest downside to JML is that he's just not very good on defense in PvP content. So he's a little bit limited with that. Do I recommend you go for him early game? Not necessarily. The problem with his recs, even though they are good recs, kind of like Lord Vader, they are very intensive. It requires a lot of high-end characters, a lot of investment to be able to unlock him. So I don't know that I would go for him or recommend him for a very early game player. Certainly I would recommend Slicker over him, but he does have a lot of great viability for mid-game players in particular, especially if you're someone that has some pretty solid defensive viability in PvP content, but you're struggling on offense and, in particular, struggling with feats in Conquest. If you're struggling in Conquest, he is arguably the #1 character to go after. Arguably. We'll talk more about the other one here in a moment. Now, the other feat freak that we have in this category, guys, is kind of the total opposite of JML, and that is Rey. So Rey is an incredible defensive option in PvP content. Unlike JML, who's terrible in defense but great on offense, Rey is incredibly difficult to beat in PvP content when she's on defense, especially with her viability to use all sorts of different characters. That, along with JML with light side characters, is why these two are so good in PvE content, though, because they can work with so many different characters. With JML, you really do need Jedi in particular with his team, but you can throw in any light side character and you can get kills and things like that with that character. It's just an incredible mechanic. Fingers crossed that CG never changes that, but he is incredible for that because you can then get kill feats with characters that have no business getting wins or kills. For instance, in this current Conquest, we've got Drogon kills that we need. We've got... well, even heat. We need heat feats. He's good for getting that kind of a feat. He's so good at getting all these different kinds of feats out there, guys. It's amazing. Rey works much the same way, except it's less so that the kill aspect. Again, it's not so much of an offensive standpoint. But if you need characters to survive, she's a great one for that because of the automatic damage immunity that she will give to you. She adds a lot of survivability to teams that are out there. A lot of complex nuances in terms of defeating that team because of her and Ben Solo, if you have Ben Solo in particular. But again, it's just a phenomenal character to go for. Plus, the Lightspeed bundle, both with her and Slicker, make them very, very accessible for early game. Do I necessarily recommend going for Rey early game? No. So here's the big difference between Rey and Slicker. Slicker does not really require a lifter unit. He kind of is able to do it himself. Rey really needs that lifter unit. She really needs Ben Solo. And if you're early game and you're not getting high in Conquest levels and you're not able to get Ben Solo yet, she is kind of limited. She's not near as good without Ben Solo. So she is, again, I would consider more of a mid-game play versus early game. Certainly late game. Certainly late game. If you are a late game player and you don't have her, she's a great investment. But I tend to struggle to say that she's somebody you should immediately go for in early game just because of that fact. Still an overall great character. She's got great defensive viability in PvP. She allows you to do a ton of stuff in PvE content. Highly, highly recommend her. She's very, very solid. Now, Moving on to the boss of bonuses. So CG changed things up a little bit here, guys, with these next teams that we've got here, in that they are getting kind of bonus events, if you will, that really make them even better than they were if they were just released like the rest of the GLs that are out there. Those two teams in particular, we're going to talk about Leia first. Leia is kind of the newest, latest, greatest thing. And she has a node of her own that really allows you to work on Zeta and Omicrons and all that jazz that is good. It's not as good as the other one that we'll talk about, but it is good. Her requirements also, from a late game standpoint, are excellent. So kind of along the lines of Lord Vader, all of her recs are very good and or they benefit the team directly. Certainly not really anything bad out there. The only thing that you could argue is bad is the Ewok team / Lobot, but even then, they add a lot of viability to a lot of other teams that you have. Do I think that they are an early game GL to go after? No. The reason for that is because a lot of her requirements, most early game players are not going to have necessarily. Is it possible? Yes, you could certainly hard farm her and go for her very quickly. That's very possible. But I think in the long grand scheme of things, she is not someone that's necessarily as early game friendly as some of the other GLs that are out there. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. One of the nice things about Leia, though, outside of the bonus node that she gets, is that she is very good on offense. She is viable on defense. She's not bad on defense. Kind of not necessarily the same as like a JML or a C, where they're just really not good at all on defense. You can put her on defense. She's going to get you some holds here or there against certain teams. But now that the Drogon Kron is gone, she's not quite as viable as she once was. So I would lean more towards her on offense, but she does have more viability, I think, across both spectrums than what some of the other GLs do that we have talked about thus far. Do I think she's better than the other GLs that we've talked about? Yes. But I think with her requirements and with her sort of limited viability to some degree, I think she's not quite as good as some of the other ones for early gameplay in particular. The other character that fits into the boss of bonuses node, guys, is Jabba. So Jabba has a phenomenal event where you can work on your mods. And the other thing with Jabba is that he is phenomenal across really all spectrums. He's great in PvE if you're talking about Rote because he has a lot of bonus nodes. He's great in PvE and Conquest because he gets you a lot of the non-force user feats as well. Plus, the team as a whole, generally speaking, is pretty survivable. You're going to be able to get 3 stars with him. Leia, I didn't really talk a whole lot about Conquest with Leia. Leia is very much the same thing. She's very good in Conquest. Lots of survivability with that team. Both of these teams are excellent in Conquest in particular. I would argue that Jabba has more of an impact in Rote at the moment, though. That could change down the line, though, guys. Jabba in PvP currently is amazing. That's largely because of a Datacron. Even without the Datacron, though, Jabba is still a very, very good team, particularly on defense. He has some viability on offense, but he's really more of a, I would argue, a defensive GL than anything else. Unlike Leia, I think Jabba is an excellent early game GL, folks. Most of his requirements are relatively easy for beginning players to get, and you're not really stuck behind any kind of a Conquest character or anything like that with this team. They're all out there, they're all viable and farmable, similar to Leia. Those are all farmable, they're not Conquest locks, anything like that. But I just think that Jabba's recs are a lot easier in terms of availability, and the relic levels on the two of them are comparable, but I still think Jabba's just a little bit easier. And I think Jabba is more viable across all game modes as well, guys, compared to Leia. So for me, even though I have them in the same category, guys, I would put Jabba slightly ahead of Leia in terms of who's better and who's not. Like I said, all of these characters really, we're not necessarily saying one is better than the other. They're all really, really good. But you can kind of see where they fall into in terms of an overall best versus worst, just from what we're talking about here. Speaking of best versus worst, what I would argue is far and away the best GL in the game, guys. And that comes with a caveat. We'll get to that in a second. That is JMK, Jedi Master Kenobi. He has the high ground, guys. He absolutely has the high ground. Trigger all your memes. He is phenomenal in all game modes. He's great in PvP content. He can be on offense. He can be on defense. He doesn't need datacrons to be very good. The caveat to that is he needs Cat. We'll come back to that in a second. PvE content. He's great in Rote if you need him to be. Usually, I would actually argue that JML is more versatile than what JMK is, but JMK still, if you can get a full team of Galactic Republic around him, he's still a phenomenal character that can still do a lot of great work. In Conquest, I mentioned earlier that JML is arguably the best GL in Conquest. JMK can give him a run for his money. I think JML is better at getting feats than JMK is, but I believe JMK to be the better overall GL in Conquest, particularly when it comes to beating difficult comps and getting 3 stars on those difficult comps. He's just, the survivability of this team is incredible. It really, really is. Cat, obviously, we got to talk about Cat, guys. Without Cat, this team is nothing. They are so much worse. Like, they're down on the level of C in particular. But with Cat, with that lifter unit, this team is far and away the best in the game. And the reason it's the best in the game is because of the kit. You don't need relic levels. So with, for instance, Jabba, I would argue you need a lot of relic levels on certain characters. Leia, those relic levels are already required, so they're already there. Same thing with JML. You've got to have a relic 9, in my opinion, for him to really hit hard. Rey, same thing. You need her high relic levels. All of these teams require very high relic levels for the most part to be super successful. JMK does not. His kit is so good that you could get away with having like a relic 5 team, and you're still going to beat a lot of these teams. They are that good. Let me know what you guys think. Did we nail this? Did we totally miss the mark on this? I'm sure some of you will have some interesting thoughts on this. So obviously, like I said, guys, we have kind of a general tier ranking of their strengths and weaknesses, but I would also argue this is kind of where they fall into place in terms of an S tier to D tier as well. I would put C at the very bottom. I think he is the worst GL currently in the game. Lord Vader slightly ahead of him. Slicker is arguable, but I think just overall across the entire game, he's not quite as good as JML and Rey are. And then I think it's pretty clear our top 3, JMK followed by Jabba and Leia. I don't think there's really any debating that, in my opinion, guys. I'm intrigued to see what you guys think, both in terms of how I categorize them, as well as how they kind of rank across the board from top to bottom. Did I miss it? Did I miss the mark on this, guys? Who should be higher? Who should be lower? Let me know in comments. Super intrigued to see what you guys have to say about it. Last but not least, everybody, if you liked today's video, would really appreciate it, everybody, if you guys could like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, guys. And particularly because we are super close to becoming monetized on this channel. All we need are subscribers. We already have everybody watching plenty. I've got plenty of watch hours. You guys love the content. You keep watching the content. I highly appreciate that. Now we just need those of you that are watching the content to turn that subscribe button on. And then YouTube will stop making money, and we'll start making money. It'd be a lot better. Really, really appreciate it if you guys could do that, guys. It's free for you. It's great for me. Hopefully, I've convinced you. I'm going to stop talking and let you guys push the button. Last but not least, if you guys liked everything you saw, make sure you check out the next video.